But awesome. We'll go over the bass miking technique and the mics that I prefer to use. Obviously, we're using an industry standard here, the Ampeg 810 Classic. Again, standard for a reason. I think they sound great, really flexible. I love the 810s, the speakers that come in. I think they're, I want to say they're Sovtek made, maybe. I don't know exactly whatever, but I know they really sound good, recorded, nice, tight, punchy bass sound. But I use some industry standard mics with the bass rigs or whatever. Like Sennheiser 421 is one of my favorite on axis, and I use also off axis. I will use a Beta 52, a large diaphragm dynamic. Again, these are both dynamics, and if the proximity is the same, you're not going to have too much issue with any phase problems. Again, a lot of people, you can use a condenser microphone in conjunction with the dynamic on the bass amp also, but just like with guitar, you can have phase issues that you might have to rectify. But just like with the guitar, usually what I do is I'll have the 421 more straight on, just right off the sound, right off the cone here in the middle, just slightly off. And normally, like I said, I would spend some time, just like with guitar, just kind of moving it around, just an inch or two here and there to try to get that perfect full range tone. You're gonna pick up most of the highs and lows with this position. And then off axis, I would blend the large diaphragm. Of course, isn't the ideal setting, but it'll work. But this will be a little further off the cone or whatever, and pick up more of the lows and the mids from the speakers, which are generated towards the outside of the speaker. And that's pretty much it.
Cool.
Very similar to the guitars, just
yeah.
A slight difference in preference of the mic. Obviously, more tuned for the lows, and the high end is a bit fatter.
Okay.
So it's got a different kind of bass should sit in the mix differently, obviously, frequency-wise. The guitars are more dominating in the upper mid-range, and the bass is going to have some mid-range, but a lower upper mid-range, and then primarily the low mids and the lows where the bass is going to live. So just different mic choices. Same type approach. And obviously, like I said, a lot of people record bass direct. And I also record the bass DI just like guitar.
Yep.
Always, just in case. I rarely, honestly, use the bass direct in the mix, but some people like a bass direct tone. Like if a client brings me a tone reference that I can tell, the direct bass has a different quality. It's usually a little more transient, a little more extended low end. There's qualities that make it, I can tell that are different just from experience with a direct bass signal in a mix. And if they bring me a reference and that's what they really want, then that's, I'll go with the direct. Yeah, I'll give them what they want.
Cool.
But I usually at least try an amp just because it's a little warmer. It sits in the mix with the guitars nicely.
Yep.
It's just a kind of a traditional thing also. And
so aiming these things, like that's different.
Yeah.
Right? On a bass cone, do you always go direct or like pointed right at the center of the...
It's really similar. Like I said, I'm attempting to do this, and this
Okay.
it just kind of looks different because it's not straight.
Gotcha.
But normally I would have this at an angle a little bit too.
Okay.
Kind of pointed at the center. This mic stands just kind of loose, and
Yeah.
Said I'd spend a little more time. We'll just do this for now. But this is kind of usually more kind of an angle, but more picking up, like I said, the around the cone of the speaker.
All right. Should we go see what that sounds like?
Let's do that.
Let's do it. Looks good. Looks good.
But cool, Tommy, if you don't mind, I'm gonna check the tuning on the bass.
Yeah.
The intonation.
Should be in the ballpark.
Yep. Yeah, we checked it yesterday, so it should be.
I just checked it too.
But again, like I said, just like with guitar, I'm OCD, so I check for all my clients. But one thing's crucial with bass, obviously bass is really common fingerstyle in rock and metal. So you want to find out, hey, how do you play? Like if you're tuning, if a bass player plays fingerstyle, you need to tune fingerstyle because it honestly affects a little bit. But I like to try to see the drummer, like I said, especially, usually a lot of this is a good opportunity, like the band jams with the drummer during the initial tracking, and the bass player's going, you know you need to kind of do that for the tuning. But the bass player's like, you know, then it's like, okay, I need to tune like this. And I know Tommy doesn't just kill the bass, you know. So I'm gonna just do like a medium regular. But normally I would check the intonation, same thing, just check it all at fretted locations, make sure it's playing in tune. We checked it yesterday, it was pretty good, so just to move it forward. But again, with bass, I usually try to make sure, I usually try to get the client to give me an idea. I mean, the bass tones are so across the board, you know. I think they're more varied than guitar tones, really.
Well, bass is such a tricky instrument because of
It is.
where it sits in the mix. Because it can really make a part a lot better,
Yeah.
or it can distract the part. So
A lot of people don't understand how important bass is.
yeah,
I mean, they really
it's
don't.
such an important part. Certain people don't hear it that well.
Yeah.
All the bass players that are watching the feed are like, yes,
yeah, exactly.
thank you.
Oh, you hear it like in the BT band mix.
I
you know,
love
Dan
bass.
is essential, and Dan is
Yeah.
all up in the mix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not so bad. It's not so high and you know like an annoying tone where it's like distracting.
Right.
It actually works in terms of the orchestration of the parts and things. Yeah, it's tasteful. Well, Dan, you know, Dan's insane or whatever.
Yeah.
So
I really like, bass is just, it's an interesting instrument. It's another piece to the puzzle, you know, it's cool.
Yeah, but you know, on the flip side, there's times where like you know, there's metal bands and stuff where sometimes the bass player just needs to simplify and not do, you know, crazy stuff, you know, and so that, you know, that's part of my goal too is to kind of to think of the bass. A lot of times, bass players, oftentimes they don't think of they're trying to do the coolest part they can do that sounds cool by themselves, but when you know in the ensemble and how it mixes with the drums and the guitar and the job of the bass, yeah, they're like, dude, you might want to tone that down. Or just play subdivisions, or you know, you pick your punches with the crazy stuff, you know. Yeah, I'm more likely to recommend a change in the bass line than almost any other thing.
And that's another thing I think, like you said, sometimes a change really helps a song.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people take that personally.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've been there. We all have. You write something, you think it's perfect, and I think it's just one of those things. You like I was saying earlier, you need to know you need to know things can change and be better if they're changed.
I try to tell people to come in with an open mind. Let's have
Yeah.
fun. Let's have an open mind. You know.
I think that's
It's
what's fun with Between the Bear and Me. We all know we can be like, Paul, you need to change. I think if you do this, it might be cool. He's not like, all right, man, cool, dude. Like, you know, he's like, okay, let's try it that way and see if it sounds better. And you know, well,
And the flip side, same thing with me. You know, if somebody's like, man, you know, if I'm stoked on something, the tone or whatever, somebody's like, man, that's just not. And I'm like, what? You know, but I try to just stay positive. My thing is, as an engineer, I think you should always just stay positive, and you know, you could always track both, and just try it out. I just try everything. And if you have time and budget, and it's not crazy, time consuming or you know difficult or whatever, just try it out. And if it works, then cool. You know, oftentimes people, you know, there's been tons of times like even Dan, like he'll be doing a crazy bass line. I'm like, I don't know if that's gonna work. That's crazy.
And
but I don't know the keyboard part.
And it
you know.
comes out awesome.
It is. And then when I finally hear the, you know, I'm quiet. I'm just like let it go down. And when I hear the final product, I'm like, oh, it totally was awesome. It makes the part, you know. And so you know, things like that happen all the time. And then vice versa. Sometimes I'm thinking, yeah, I mean that's going to be really cool, and then I end up like, well, you know what, we need to change that.
Or sometimes you go back. You know, like the thing you thought you should have changed
Was
is
right
the
to
best.
begin with. Yeah.
Is the best, yeah.
So it's just being open-minded and try to stay positive with the client and get them to you know try to be open-minded about your ideas, and you try to be open-minded about their ideas, and just try it all. Like I said, look, that's one of the benefits from Pro Tools and digital recording. It's not analog. It's like you have infinite virtual tracks, literally. I guess up until your hard drive space runs out, you know. But it's just, you know, you can just keep trying different stuff, and you know, ultimately, like I said, there is an aspect that I want like to commit to. Like I said, if you notice, I haven't been comping any tracks. I don't do the whole, hey, let's track 5 takes of that or 10 takes of that, and then we'll go through later and pick out the best takes. I don't like that. That's super time consuming, and it's just like, you know, it's just opening for disaster. Because what if you take 10 takes and there's not a perfect take in there? That happens a lot. I mean, I've had I've worked on guitar leads for an entire 8-hour day before. And, and it's like if we just took the first 10 takes, we still wouldn't have had the right take. Sometimes it takes 100 takes, to get the right part. And so I'm like, let's track it until it's right. It's either right or it's not. And keep that, commit to that. It's like, and if you decide later that that's still not good enough, then redo it then. But don't just like leave it up to another producer or, hopefully tomorrow I'll hear it differently or something like that. It's just like, if it's not right, just don't keep it, just try it again.
Cool.
It's one industry process that I really am not too keen on. Like I love tracking direct signals as a backup and stuff, but tracking backup takes just to hope that the one's in there somewhere is just too leaving it to chance. The only time maybe I could see doing that is if there's an actual producer that's, hey, this guy's going to help us produce the record. You're actually just engineering. And we don't want you to make decisions. We want this other dude to make decisions, but you're going to be tracking the vocals. So then that's the case. I'd be like, well, let's just do a bunch of checks, and this guy's going to choose because he can't be here. That's definitely not the ideal situation. Ideally, the guy should be there, but that's a rare situation for me personally, anyway. Okay, this looks good so far. But yeah, on bass, like I said again, most of the tones in the hands and the pickups and stuff. Like I said, if you want the Warwick type of bass tone, you just need to use a Warwick. Yep. Their tone, their scale, their pickups sound different than other bass pickups. I mean, and it's even more noticeable with bass than say guitar, I think. But there's I noticed it seems like if you just start flat. It's like if you don't know what kind of bass tone you want or whatever, or like this bass, we've never recorded this bass. It's the first time we're going to hear this bass. I'm sure it's going to sound great, but I'm going to start flat because the cool thing is that you can, like I said, you can EQ bass and stuff like that, stuff that's not distorted and things like that in the mix. This is actually going to be a driven bass tone, but you can actually EQ in the final product with the bass to get the blend and mix where you want it to be with the guitars and the drums and so forth. So. These things are designed to sound optimum. This is like the factory. Okay, this is the best setting, and you can tweak it if you want. So let's start it flat, and then same thing with the head, and then we'll see where we need to go with it. I've got it on standby right now, so let me make sure I've got. And again, with the bass, I track direct signals as well as amp signals. Or if I do an amp sim, I track the direct signal and the amp sim. I think this is, yeah, that's 15. Cool. Let's take the standby off and hopefully don't blow people's heads off. Oh, wrong button. It is an Ampeg SVT or whatever. It's an industry standard, like I said, for a reason. This is a tube head. I've got the actual SVT 3 Pro, which is a solid state version. Very similar sound or whatever. I'd actually like to have this version. But the solid state does have kind of a tighter bottom end. And again, here on my EQ, I'm doing some similar stuff with EQ. On the bass, I've got quite a bit of the highs just rolled off. I've got the super lows kind of chiseled out to make room for the kick drum bump. That's where the kick drum low end lives, is in this area. So I've got some low end content in there. Sometimes people will make a little dip to make space. Yeah, that bass is sounding killer already. This particular song, we went with a little drive on the bass. I'm actually using this as a guitar pedal, but it's got a compressor, and it actually sounds good for bass. I have the bass version of this, and normally I use a bass-specific compressor, but I think this will work good for this particular purpose. Usually because of bass and like clean guitar, I'll use, if there's no drive, I'll use a compressor. This particular tone, since we're using drive, the drive actually acts as the compressor. To achieve overdrive, it pushes the tone against the ceiling, a threshold, and that's what causes distortion breakup. And so it compresses the signal. So I'm actually going to run it off for right now. I'll leave it. Normally I would unplug this and not have it in the loop, so it's, because it might affect, lower the tone quality or whatever. But go ahead and play real quick, Tommy. What's unique about this Keeley modified tube screamer is that this thing doesn't cut that much lows. Play real. Like the original tube screamer, I know you probably, if you've ever messed with a regular guitar pedal, distortion pedal or overdrive, it'll actually, once you engage it, it cuts a significant amount of lows. And it's good for guitar because it cleans up the lows a lot. But for the bass, you want to keep those lows. Like I said, I'm recording the direct signal, but this is actually modified to where it only affects the frequencies. I think it's maybe 350 and up. It has a boost and cut EQ wise, but it leaves the lows alone, which is great. So this actually is really usable for bass or guitar, or low tuned guitars for that matter. But just to refresh my memory, I want to hear your original bass tone. See what. Pretty. I think we used that pedal, obviously.
Yeah, pretty.
Go ahead.
It was even more drive, it sounded like.
Yep. Probably similar enough. I think we had some other drives and stuff.
Yeah.
Go ahead and play for me again, Tom. Yeah, let's give it a shot. Yeah, this will be a practice run. Let me know about levels and stuff. Less bass. Gotcha. Okay. I know you get a lot of the room.
Yeah, I can't tell. Like a grip.
We've got the thing just so cranking. I guess this is probably about as close as it gets.
It's fine.
Yeah. I could turn this thing down, man. It doesn't have to be that loud. And I'll turn it up here. Yeah, a lot of times there's a notion with guitar and bass is like to get the good tone you have to crank it, and that started back in the day, back with the old Marshalls, where you get extra distortion when you crank because they didn't have a lot of preamp distortion. It's not necessarily the case now, I don't think. I think most amps modern amps are designed to sound their best to keep up an acoustic drum level. Right. I think they're designed, for the high watt amps anyway, to sound maximum of that. If you push it harder than that, you get more tube snare and breakup. So you get I guess a softer, less defined tone, which could be ideal. But a lot of times if you want a tighter tone, a more defined sound, turning it down is actually ideal. right, go ahead, Tommy, play. Try this out. Happening a lot. Let's figure out what this is. I'm getting some digital glitches here. I think it's with the digital sync. See where it's dropping out here. And it's probably got to do with the Focusrite connection.
We can technically, I mean, it's...
We can copy and paste
yeah,
stuff
what
anyway, so...
For this minute and a half, it's literally that riff over and over. So I think it's more just showing how we got the tone.
Yeah, let's just go ahead and scratch it, and just, even with the digital glitches, I can paste those out.
Okay.
And yeah, we just won't worry about it. Like I said, probably all we had to do is usually for those of you at home or whatever, to deal with digital glitches usually just means basically kind of reboot. Yeah. Just restart. Like I think the Focusrite has a digital clock that's syncing with Pro Tools, and it's probably gotten out of sync or whatever. Cool. Because I don't know if there's a master clock on this setup or whatever. I think you rocked it.
Cool. Yeah.
Solid.
That's a tough one.
But it's effective. Like I said, it just establishes a nice groovy foundation. You know,
It works for the song.
to build the songs. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
We got a couple questions,
Absolutely.
and then we got another full day tomorrow.
Awesome.
So it's going to be, we got a lot to cover. Cyrus wants to know, what do you think about amp emulators like Guitar Rig and Amplitude?
They're great.
You might want to undo the bass.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mute it.
Can you hit standby for me, please?
I got you.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, they're great. Like I said, I mean, I personally prefer amps. Like I said, you know, as many people say, like I said, I just feel like the amps are more three-dimensional sounding. They just sound more lively.
You're actually moving air.
Yeah, like I said, like Steve Evans or whatever, you know, it feels like the amps come out of the speakers as opposed to sit in a plane. Usually the process stuff or the processor-based stuff or whatever, it kind of has this it's hard to describe to me. But to me, it sounds like a kind of a starchy type of sound. You know what I'm talking about? There's new like the Kemper units and the new Axe-Fx like 2 and beyond. They're getting it to the point where they sound really natural. But having said that, some people like a kind of an unnatural sound. You know, like
I think it depends on the music.
Yeah, the music. Like Dimebag Darrell, he used a solid state amp. Most
Right.
people would think solid states aren't good sound, but he got a great sound that worked great for that band, and you know, and it didn't have, there was no tubes involved. You know, for the first albums, and it's kind of the same thing. Like I said, to me, like the amp modelers should be looked at. You know, the amp sims and stuff should be looked at as a whole different thing. It's just a different way to take the electric guitar signal and manipulate it. And you know, you can get close to real amp sounds if you want, but you can also get radical, like way more defined sounds than you can possibly get with tube amps. Tube amps has a certain smear, and it's kind of tough. You got to kind of fight to get a tube amp to sound clear and defined in a mix or whatever. And with some of the tube amps, and you know, the solid state emulation, or the you know, the amp simulation versions, they actually tend to sound more, they have kind of the same EQ and the same bigness, but more defined. So it actually can be better in some situations. So it's just really whatever you like, whatever works well with the music.
Totally. Mountain Stream wants to know: would you record differently playing different styles? So basically, if there's different styles, is it the approach that you take going to be different?
Slightly. Like I said, what I'm going over today is primarily kind of a rock, and I'm kind of
Yeah.
touching on metal. Obviously, this is a more rock song what Tommy's doing. But yeah, of course, like if I recorded a jazz band or like a bluegrass quartet or something like that, it's a completely different approach. You know, you track the guys playing together. You know, you put one drum mic over the drums for a jazz band. And you mic the other guys. You know, sometimes you mic. You know, like with a bluegrass band, you take a stereo mics or a couple solo mics and stuff, and just mic the guys all playing together. You know, and so there's differences with different styles or whatever. But for most rock and most commercial-based stuff, and stuff that's going to be layered, I mean, it'd be a similar approach. Just different tunings, different drum head selections, different amps, tones, different guitars, things like that, or whatever that are more appropriate for that style. And it's a lot of that's kind of a known thing. Just look at your favorite artists. You know, or look at the artist that's doing the stuff that you want, that you're kind of getting ready to record, and see
Yeah.
what they're using, and that'll kind of give you a good idea of like what you probably should try first.
Cool.
Not saying that you can't get the similar sounds or great sounds with other stuff, but you won't use a guitar with EMG and try to get like a clean jazz sound. It's just they're not built for that. You know, it's you know, if you want a clean jazz sound, use an ES335.
Yep.
You know.
Makes sense. Arik wants to know, Tommy, do you always track guitars with effects or dry and add effects later? So when
We normally put effects on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a two-tier thing, because we often add, you know, put effects before.
It depends on the part a lot. Too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because effects, you know, was going to mention that the effects sound different. Like if you put delay on post to the amped signal, it has a kind of a different sound. It's kind of more of a digital delay. You know, that's adding an echo to the distorted signal. If you put a delay pedal in front of the amp, that echoes the guitar signal, so the actual distortion decreases as the level that goes down, and that doesn't happen. So they sound different. And like you know, sometimes I'll use both. You know, both like a verb going in and a verb, because they just sound different. I've noticed, like, to me, it's kind of a warmer, more vintagey sound when you use like a reverb going in, or when you use a pedal. For some reason, it just has kind of a more vintage sound, because all those effects get distorted, particularly if you're using an overdrive or distorted sound. All the effects get distorted. And then if you use a regular amp and add the stuff in the computer, then basically it's adding effects to the already distorted sound, so the effect
Right.
itself doesn't actually get distorted, if that makes any sense.
Awesome.
So it just really depends on the sound.
Okay.
Like the both can sound good. It's just a matter of experience. You know, and to me, it's like, you know, with Tommy's situation being more like an organic rock type of thing, we just went for the pedal type approach. Kind of have that
Cool.
vintagey kind of, you know, classic. You know, the classic rock in you know, up through the '90s. You know, grunge. I mean, they were all about pedals. You know,
Yeah.
like
And
stomping
with demoing, I try to find sort of effect that I want, and I just record the riff, and then from there I'll tweak whatever effects after the fact to basically be like, Jamie, this is kind of what I'm going for. But yeah, so that's how I approach on the.
There's been situations where you've had effects that you've actually come up with in Logic. And
That
we
we've
just,
used.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
just like, dude, I can't find anything
Yeah.
in Pro Tools or this in
Yeah.
Axe Effects. Like, it's going to take forever to try to find something that matches.
We've
And
done that with
sometimes,
vocals too. Like if there's one like a weird,
like a crazy
part
effect.
that-
Sometimes there's like effects on a particular plug-in or a particular piece of gear that just you cannot get with something else. And sometimes you just have to use whatever that is. However crazy that particular piece of gear is.
Yeah.
And and how you're like, hey, this piece of gear is actually technically better, but you can't get that sound. So, if it's like a Digitech, RP10 or something, if that's the only way you can get that sound, you have to use it. So.